Starting off with our supposed voice of reason, Stan Marsh. Now Stan gets a lot of credit for being the most normal kid in South Park, but don't let that fool you. This dude has some seriously questionable moments that put him squarely in the somewhat evil category. Remember when he literally created a cult around himself just because he was feeling depressed? That's not exactly main character energy, that's straight up manipulation. Stan's evil mostly comes from his tendency to be incredibly selfish when things don't go his way. He'll throw his friends under the bus faster than you can say, oh my god, they killed Kenny. Plus, the whole goth phase where he was basically dragging everyone down with his doom and gloom attitude. Yeah, that wasn't just teenage angst, that was weaponized depression. He's not out here plotting world domination, but he's definitely not the innocent kid everyone thinks he is. Carl's in the same tier as Stan, but for completely different reasons. Carl's evil is the kind that comes wrapped in self-righteousness and moral superiority. This kid genuinely believes he's always right, and he'll go to absolutely insane lengths to prove his point. Remember the whole Facebook situation? Carl literally couldn't handle not being Stan's #1 friend and went completely unhinged about it. He's the type of person who would cancel you on Twitter and then write a 5-paragraph essay about why you deserved it. Kyle's not necessarily malicious, but his need to always be morally superior and his complete inability to let things go definitely puts him in problematic territory. The dude holds grudges like it's his full-time job, and that's honestly kind of terrifying. The thing about both Stan and Kyle is that their evil comes from very human places: insecurity, pride, and the desperate need to be right. They're not cartoon villains, they're just flawed kids who sometimes make really bad choices. Eric Cartman, devil. This isn't even a debate. Cartman doesn't just belong in devil tier, he is the devil tier. Like, this kid makes actual cartoon villains look like they're running a charity drive. We're talking about someone who has literally committed genocide, orchestrated elaborate revenge schemes that would make Machiavelli nervous, and somehow convinced an entire town that he was just a troubled but lovable kid. Let's just run through the greatest hits real quick because honestly, we could be here all day. This man fed a kid his own parents in Chile. Read that sentence again and let it sink in. That's not just evil, that's like advanced level sociopathic behavior that would land you on a Netflix true crime documentary. And the worst part? He enjoyed every single second of it. The pure satisfaction on his face when Scott Tenorman realized what happened was genuinely disturbing. That's not cartoon villainy anymore, that's straight up horror movie territory. But what really puts Cartman in devil tier isn't just the big dramatic moments, it's the consistent daily evil that radiates from this kid like toxic waste. He's racist, sexist, manipulative, and has zero empathy for literally anyone. Remember when he convinced Butters that the world ended just so he could go to Casa Bonita? Or when he dressed up like a robot to trick Butters' parents? This dude will destroy someone's entire mental health for the most trivial reasons and sleep like a baby afterward. The scariest thing about Cartman is how smart he actually is when it comes to manipulation. He understands people's weaknesses better than a licensed therapist and uses that knowledge purely for evil. He's not just randomly cruel, he's strategically cruel. Every insult, every scheme, every manipulation is carefully calculated for maximum damage. That's not just being a bad kid, that's being a legitimate threat to society. And can we talk about how he literally started his own cult, became a successful businessman through pure manipulation, and has somehow convinced his mom that he's an angel? This kid has gaslighted an entire town into thinking his behavior is acceptable. That's not just evil, that's evil with a PhD in psychological warfare. Cartman doesn't just do bad things, he makes other people complicit in his badness and then makes them feel guilty about it later. The only reason Cartman isn't running the world right now is because he's 9 years old and gets distracted by KFC and video games. But mark my words, this kid is gonna grow up to either be a cult leader or a Fortune 500 CEO, and honestly, I'm not sure which one is scarier. Next, Kenny. Kenny lands smack dab in the middle of our moral compass, and honestly, it makes perfect sense. This dude has literally died more times than we can count, been to heaven, been to hell, and somehow still maintains this weird zen-like balance between good and evil. Kenny's neutrality isn't because he's boring or doesn't do anything, it's because he's seen some serious stuff and just vibes with whatever's happening around him. Here's the thing about Kenny, when his friends are being good, he's right there with them. When they're plotting something absolutely unhinged, Kenny's also right there for it. Remember when he became Mysterian and was actually trying to be a legitimate superhero? That was peak good Kenny energy. But then you also have moments where he's perfectly fine going along with Cartman's insane schemes or getting into some seriously questionable situations. The dude just adapts to whatever energy the group is putting out. Most of the time, he's either trying to help his friends, survive another day in his chaotic life, or just have some fun. He's not malicious like Cartman, and he's not self-righteous like Kyle. Kenny's just a kid trying to make it through elementary school while dealing with the fact that he dies on a regular basis. That would mess anyone up, but somehow, Kenny just rolls with it. Butters. Good. Butters is proof that genuine goodness can exist even in the absolute chaos that is South Park. This kid has been through more psychological trauma than most adults, has the worst parents in television history, and somehow still maintains this incredible optimism and kindness that just melts your heart. Butters' goodness isn't naive. Well, okay, it's a little naive, but it comes from a genuine place of wanting to make people happy and see the best in everyone. Even when he's being manipulated by Cartman for the 100th time, Butters bounces back with this incredible resilience and forgiveness that's honestly inspiring. Remember when he became Professor Chaos? Even his villain arc was adorable and mostly harmless. The worst thing he did was probably change someone's restaurant order, and he felt genuinely bad about it afterward. What makes Butters truly good tier is how he treats people when he has power or influence. When he became a pimp, he was literally just trying to make everyone happy and didn't even understand what he was actually doing. When he had his own talk show, he used it to spread positivity. Even when he's trying to be bad, Butters somehow ends up making the world a slightly better place because his heart is just pure gold. Randy. Evil. Randy Marsh is absolutely unhinged and deserves every bit of his evil tier placement. This man is supposed to be a responsible adult, a father, and a geologist, but instead he's out here acting like the world's most chaotic teenager with zero impulse control. Randy's evil isn't the calculated manipulation of Cartman. It's the selfish, destructive evil of someone who refuses to grow up and constantly puts his own desires above literally everyone else, including his own family. Let's talk about how Randy has single-handedly caused more problems for South Park than most actual villains. This dude started a pandemic panic over nothing, became a drug dealer, got into fights at his son's baseball games, and somehow convinced himself he was the victim every single time. Remember when he literally destroyed the family farm just because he wanted to grow marijuana? That's not just bad parenting, that's actively sabotaging his family's future for his own selfish interests. Chef, somewhat evil. Chef lands in somewhat evil territory, and honestly, this placement hurts a little because we all loved Chef. But let's be real about some of his questionable moments throughout the series. Chef was supposed to be the voice of wisdom and the adult who actually cared about the kids, but there were definitely times when his advice were not great. His obsession with certain topics around children was definitely problematic, even if it was played for laughs. Chef's somewhat evil rating comes from the fact that while his intentions were usually good, his execution was often wildly inappropriate. He genuinely cared about the kids and wanted to help them, but sometimes his help involved giving them information or advice that probably wasn't suitable for 4th graders. Chef existed in this weird space where he was simultaneously the most responsible adult in South Park and also completely irresponsible in very specific ways. He wasn't trying to hurt anyone, and he often went out of his way to protect the kids when they really needed it. But there were definitely moments where you had to question his decision-making skills and wonder if maybe he should have thought things through a little more. Chef was like that cool uncle who means well, but sometimes gives advice that makes your parents very uncomfortable. Mr. Garrison is absolutely evil tier, and honestly, he might be one of the most consistently terrible people in the entire show. This man has been responsible for corrupting multiple generations of South Park children, and somehow he keeps getting promoted instead of fired. Garrison's evil comes from his complete inability to separate his personal issues from his professional responsibilities, combined with his tendency to take out his frustrations on literal children. Throughout the series, Garrison has exposed kids to inappropriate content, used his classroom as therapy for his own personal problems, and somehow managed to become president while being completely unqualified for any position of authority. Remember when he tried to get fired by being as offensive as possible, but instead of getting consequences, he just kept getting more power? That's not just individual evil, that's systematic evil that somehow gets rewarded. He's supposed to be educating and protecting kids, but instead he's traumatizing them on a daily basis. Garrison doesn't just fail at his job, he actively makes his job about serving his own interests, and that's genuinely evil behavior that has long-term consequences for everyone he's supposed to be helping. Mr. Mackey sits comfortably in neutral tier because he's basically the definition of lawful neutral. This dude is just trying to do his job as a school counselor while dealing with the absolute chaos that is South Park Elementary. Mackey follows the rules, tries to help students with their problems, and generally means well, but he's also kinda useless and gets caught up in whatever crazy situation is happening that week. He's just aggressively mediocre at his job while trying his best. He gives generic advice, follows school policy even when it doesn't make sense, and somehow manages to get involved in the kids' schemes without really understanding what's happening. Remember when he got addicted to marijuana? Even his rebellion was completely by accident, and he felt terrible about it afterward. The thing about Mr. Mackey is that he represents every school counselor who means well but is completely overwhelmed by the reality of their job. He's not trying to hurt anyone, but he's also not particularly effective at helping anyone either. Mackey just exists in this space of bureaucratic neutrality where he follows the rules, does what he's supposed to do, and somehow survives another day of South Park madness. He's not the hero or the villain, he's just there, doing his best with limited resources and even more limited understanding of what's actually going on around him. And we are done. Let me know in the comments which one you personally agree with and which one you don't. And I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.